Today marks, if you can believe it, 2 years since the Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel. Well, over 1,000 Israeli civilians were killed and dozens were taken hostage. The attack was the catalyst which sparked Israel's military campaign in Gaza, which has led to the deaths of tens of thousands in the territory, and also set the stage for separate confrontations with other actors in the Middle East, including Iran and the Lebanon-based group Hezbollah. Indirect talks between Israel and Hamas to end the war in Gaza are expected to continue today in Cairo. Negotiations are being mediated by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt. On social media, President Trump said talks were proceeding rapidly and that yesterday's meetings involved clarifying what he called final details.
And, you know, Mika, as I said yesterday, what we're hearing, what I'm hearing from the White House, Netanyahu seems boxed in by Donald Trump, boxed in by Americans, and increasingly by his own people. And there's a poll that came out yesterday that showed that.
Gonna get to that, yeah. Meanwhile, a new poll finds that 2/3 of Israelis say the time has come to end the war in Gaza. The latest poll by the Israel Democracy Institute finds that 66% of Israelis say the time has come to end the war in Gaza, up 13 points from 1 year ago. That's compared to 27% who say that the time has not yet come. The main reason Israelis say the war should end is the endangerment of the hostages, followed by those who say the economic and social damage is too great. 64% think Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu should take responsibility for the October 7th attack and resign, with 45% saying he should do so immediately and 19% saying he should do so after the war. And that is one of the issues here, is Netanyahu's leadership.
Yes, and Willie, I'll go ahead and say it so John Meacham doesn't have to. Abraham Lincoln said, with public opinion, anything's possible. Without it, nothing is. Well, right now, Benjamin Netanyahu does not have 2/3 of the Israeli people on his side. They want the war to end. 64% want him to resign. And so this is something that we've been talking about for a very long time, that when the war ends, the people of Israel are going to want Benjamin Netanyahu out. And that's in part one of the reasons why he doesn't want the war to end, according to the New York Times, Israeli newspapers. You see that story replayed time and time again.
Yeah, these numbers are big, and they've been trending that way for some time, and yet Netanyahu has persisted in this campaign, still bombing even as these peace negotiations go on, David Ignatius. So what are the realistic expectations, the hopes perhaps, of what could come out of Cairo and these talks when you have Hamas on one side of the table, Israel on the other? What's the best case scenario for a resolution here?
Well, the hope is that President Trump's peace plan for a phased Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, for disarmament of Hamas, for Hamas to accept that its political and military leadership in Gaza is over, will be negotiated, that there'll be amnesty for those in Hamas who want to take it, that Hamas leaders who want to leave Gaza will do so, a series of things which amount to total surrender of Hamas. And not surprisingly, Hamas is resisting that, especially, it seems, the Hamas fighters on the ground in Gaza. The leadership that's outside has signaled that it's ready for this deal, but we're still, I think, some days at a minimum from agreement. The deal would mean that the 20 living hostages and the bodies of the other hostages would finally come home, that this 2-year story that's been so tragic, traumatic in every way for both Israelis and Palestinians would, if not be over, would move into a different phase. But these negotiations require Hamas to face up to the reality that its moment is over.
Its moment is over, and here's the New York Times today talking about the tragic arc, John Meacham, of this 2-year war. I think so much, you know, they say history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. This seems to be rhyming a good deal with the United States after 9/11. We had the world on our side. just like Israel had the world on its side after October 7th. We were seen as overreaching. Benjamin Netanyahu seen as overreaching. And even in America, among Jewish Americans, the numbers are just striking. The condemnation of Benjamin Netanyahu, I think well over 60%. Well, Netanyahu's leadership of Israel down 32%. But then American Jews are asked if Benjamin Netanyahu has committed war crimes against Palestinians. 61% in America. Only 29% of Jewish Americans say he has not committed war crimes, and almost 4 in 10 Jewish Americans say Netanyahu has committed, his policies have amounted to genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. The White House sees these numbers. Mm-hmm. This is not like, anti-Semitism. Nobody can squawk that it's anti-Semitism when these are American Jews that are saying this. And the White House sees this. And that's one of the reasons I think the totality of all this is when Netanyahu first started to talk down the peace prospect, the report out of Axios, which we'll talk to Jim Van High about in a second, was President Trump screamed at Netanyahu, "Why are you always so effing negative?" White House said, "We're going to get this done," and it looks like that may be the case in part because of the weakness now of Netanyahu's own standing in Israel and America.
If one needed a case study in the intractability, the perils, the combination of both human factors and historical ones, the underlying factors of identity and real estate and justice, you couldn't do a better one. I mean, this is a more revealing case study in that. I mean, I was just thinking as you were talking, Mika's father was dealing with this 50 years ago.
Right.
This is and I would argue, I don't know where David would rank this the last 2 years in his career in terms of the Middle East. But every way you sort of walk up to it, there's nothing straightforward. I would think it's hard. There's nothing simple about this. And it requires something that we don't have enough of, which is a capacity for those in power to give up that power if they need to establish a greater good. And that's something that's very hard to arrive at.
Jim Van High, let's talk about that Axios report Joe mentioned. You obviously have Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff running these negotiations for the United States in Cairo, but the president himself, clearly, according to your report and others, frustrated with Prime Minister Netanyahu, his intransigence, his unwillingness to sit down and yield anything at the moment. So how frustrated is Donald Trump with Bibi Netanyahu today?
I think very frustrated. Interesting kind of peek behind the curtain. I think 3 of the last 4 weekends, President Trump has talked to Barak Ravid at Axios specifically about this topic. And in each one of those conversations, he's pushing really hard for a deal, making it very clear he's getting frustrated with Netanyahu, that he's tired of feeling like he's kind of getting played and that he wants this resolved. And if there's a deal, it really is going to be because the president has had it with Bibi and that he's not going to enable him anymore. He's the one person I think that Bibi has to listen to. So as you want to think about these dynamics, there's really 2 people to follow. I would read what David Ignatius writes about this because he comes at it with sourcing from so many different areas. And then Barak Ravid, who's actually talking to the president, talking to folks in Israel, and then talking to the people who are involved in the peace deal. One of the reasons that the president is so adamant about getting this done, and I think expresses some confidence in getting it done is that you have Jared Kushner and you have Tony Blair, you have others who've been pushing for a much more global deal in the Middle East, and he feels like he's quite invested in that. And so it's still a long shot. There's so many pieces that have to come together. There's a million reasons Hamas wouldn't want to do this deal or return the hostages and give up the power that it has. But I think as long as the president's putting that pressure on Bibi, it gives you the best possible chance that you can finally end this.